Welcome to the Aligned Ambition podcast. I'm your host, Pooja Venkatraman. I'm a double Harvard grad, former BCG consultant, and now an executive coach for high achievers. On this podcast, we are going to tackle the 4 key things that you need to figure out in order to live a life of aligned ambition. Those 4 things are stress, productivity, performance, and purpose. We are going to make sure that you're driving your car in the direction that you actually want to go. That is the purpose part. We're also going to make sure that your progress along the road is consistent and effective. That's the productivity and performance part. And we're going to make sure that the fuel you're pouring into your tank isn't so noxious that it's filling your car with fumes and making the whole ride miserable. That is the stress part. Because if you can tackle those 4 things, stress, productivity, performance, and purpose, you can build the life and the career that you actually want. Not the life you think you're supposed to have, not the life that burns you out or doesn't fit quite right, but the life you actually want. One that fulfills your biggest ambitions and unleashes your fullest potential without sacrificing your sanity, your relationships, your authenticity, or your paycheck. A life that feels as good on the inside as it looks on the outside. That's what aligned ambition is all about. Let's get started. Hey guys, I am so excited for part 4 of our series, 5 key career mistakes that high achievers make. So if you are a high achiever, if you're an Ivy League grad, you work in consulting, you work in finance, you work in tech, you are someone who has worked very hard and strategized very carefully to get to the prestigious place where you are right now, but now you're feeling burnt out, misaligned, disillusioned. Something is not quite right where you are, to the point where you're like, I know that something has to change. I know I can't keep going on like this, but you're also not sure what you want to do next. And that uncertainty is keeping you stuck and confused because you feel like you can't let go of the monkey bar that you're holding onto right now without knowing the next monkey bar that you're going to grab onto. So you don't know the next monkey bar, you're just going to let go and fall into the void. So this series has been about going through 5 different career mistakes that keep high achievers stuck at this point. And in the short term, these mistakes stop you from being clear on what you want to do next, to knowing what the next monkey bar is that you want to grab onto. And then ultimately, long term, these 5 mistakes actually prevent high achievers from building a career that is as internally fulfilling as it is externally successful, a career that looks good on the outside and feels good on the inside. These 5 mistakes are preventing you from building it. So we've already covered mistakes 1 through 3 in the last 3 podcast episodes. Mistake number 1 was not being clear about what you want your career to be and not owning your wants 100%. Mistake number 2 was trying to arrive or trying to make it, trying to cross some threshold, after which you will finally feel good about yourself versus realizing that life and your career is just 99% process. And you have to fall in love with the process and build your home in the process. And then mistake number 3 is focusing on your weaknesses instead of investing in your strengths, and basically having a weakness-based strategy for your career instead of having a strengths-based strategy. So those are the last 3 mistakes. You can listen to them in the last 3 podcast episodes. But really, those 3 mistakes are all about you. They're about your wants, your desires, your strengths, your perspective, your process that you want to fall in love with and build a home in. And it's really important to focus on all those you things and get them really clear. But once you've figured out those 3 things about yourself, here's the next mistake that people make, and it actually has very little to do with you. Mistake number 4 that keeps high achievers stuck and confused about what to do next in their career is not finding the handshake between your superpowers, your desires, and a high value problem that somebody else has. So connecting your superpowers and your desires to somebody else's high value problem is what gets you paid. This is what makes it your career and not just a hobby. And I want to use the analogy of a technology versus a product, right? So I'll use LLMs as an example for technology. Everyone's talking a lot about AI. They have been for the last couple of years. I'm sure it's top of mind. So LLMs are a technology. It's just this thing where it's like we built a model that can input lots and lots of, it can ingest lots and lots of data, and then you can query the model using this chatbot interface, and it will write these you can query it in like natural language, and it'll write these natural language responses that pull on all the data that is like ingested, and it gives pretty good responses. That's a technology, right? That's LLM technology. That's not a product. Right? And the distinction, or how you would translate that technology into a product, is to say, who has a problem that can be solved with this technology. And you'd start thinking about use cases and products, right? So you might say, oh, one kind of person who has a problem is a college student who needs to read like thousands of pages of reading that like realistically nobody's actually reading all those pages, but they need to get a functional understanding of all that material and they need to write papers based on that. That is a use case. That is a product that you could shape the technology into. Or you might also say a different person that has a problem and could be a use case for the technology of LLMs is like a lawyer who just got discovery on a big case and like the opposing law firm just like shipped over thousands of boxes full of documents and they need to pour through all these documents and find the smoking gun, find the evidence. Every single document has to be read in a high level of detail, but there's just like thousands and thousands of pages, right? And in order for them to, and that they have to go through in order to present their defense in the case. And so that's another totally different problem, totally different person, totally different use case, but that's another product that you could shape the technology into, right? So thinking about that distinction between technology and product, it's almost like the difference between clay, like a material, versus a bowl, a plate, or a cup, right? Which is what you shape the material into. That's the same distinction between your superpowers and the high value problem that you aim it towards, right? And not really figuring out that handshake, that's the mistake people make, is once you're clear on your superpowers, you now have to kind of take off your self-discovery hat and put on your product strategy hat, right? You have to go from being the research scientist who's developing the LLM and is super excited about the technology now into being the product strategist, right? And being like, okay, that's great that we have this technology that works in all these ways, but like, hey, research scientist, like, stop telling me about how the product works. Like, that's enough. Now I need to focus on the customer who has problems that are high value, that they're willing to pay to get solved, and that this technology could solve that problem really effectively for them, right? So it's really about taking off your self-discovery hat, putting on your product strategist hat, taking the focus off of yourself and how you work and what your desires are, and what your goals are and what your superpowers are. That's great. That's very important. But now it's about taking the focus off of that and pivoting to say, now I'm going to look outward. Who has problems, who has high value problems that are causing them a lot of pain, that they would pay a lot of money to solve, that I can angle my superpowers, my technology towards those. I can shape my technology into a product that will serve them really well. And like I said, this is what makes this a career, right? And not your hobby. This is that last critical component. If you've ever seen the framework of Ikigai, right? Which is how you build a successful and fulfilling career. The 4 components of Ikigai are doing work that you enjoy doing, that you are good at, that the world needs, and that you can be paid for, right? So the work that you enjoy doing and that you're good at, that's all the like self-focused stuff. And then it's the work that the world needs and that it'll pay you for. That's what this question is about, right? Because at the end of the day, people pay to have their own high value problem solved. So not switching hats, right? Not taking off the self-reflection hat and not putting on the product strategist hat, and then really taking a strategy lens, right, to this question and really investigating and discovering the same way that you would if you were at, OpenAI or Anthropic and you were like, I have to develop the roadmap of all the different use cases that we are going to tackle as a company, right? And this is the product strategy that we have. If you think about the level of rigor, calmness, problem-solving energy, right, that you would have if you were like leading that strategy project, that's the same level of rigor and calmness and problem-solving energy you need to bring to this question of like, now that I know what my superpowers and my desires are, now that I know what the process is that I want to build my home in, now that I know that what I want, I need to now bring that level of strategy and rigor to figure out where in the market do I angle it. So let me tell you why it actually is really fun to think this way and to like not, to solve this mistake. One is it's actually really nourishing and relieving to think about other people and stop thinking about yourself, right? High achievers, not in a selfish way, but because we are achievement oriented and we're like status conscious and we are wanting to do a good job, wanting to make sure we're keeping up with the pack or impressing others, with where we are and like the progress we've made and the milestones we've hit. It's easy for our brains to get a little bit self-focused, but it's actually stressful to be self-focused. It's not fun to constantly thinking about, am I doing a good job? Where am I relative to the pack? Are people like impressed with what I'm doing? It's not like a fun line of inquiry. And so stopping that focus and really pivoting yourself to being like, who am I trying to help? What problems are out there that people are actively seeking solutions for? And how can I think about them? And how I can help them, how my superpowers can help them, how I can help those people discover me, right? That is actually such a relief to take the focus off yourself and to really just focus on other people and helping them and their problems. It's a relief. And I find for most people, it's actually a more nourishing and like sustainable source of purpose, right? And longevity in your career. Because this feeling of, hey, I need to prove myself. I need to make it, I need to succeed. You would think that that would be like good fuel, and it's good short-term fuel, but I don't find that like for a lot of people that it's really nourishing long-term fuel. At a certain point, you get kind of sick of thinking about yourself and you get tired and zapped and burned out by constantly comparing yourself to others, comparing yourself to where you thought you would be, noticing all the ways that you're inadequate. At the end of the day, it's not good long-term fuel versus stopping thinking about yourself and really honing in and falling in love with the problem, falling in love with the person that you're helping, falling in love with the service that you're doing in the world. That is such a more nourishing and fulfilling and sustainable source of fuel as you are building your career, right? And figuring out what you want to do next and pursuing excellence and really trying to do the best work that you can do. It's one of the things that I use very regularly whenever I get into kind of a mental spiral and I get down on like, oh, what am I doing? And like, I feel like I'm not doing a good job and I feel like I'm behind. Anytime my brain kind of goes into a negative spiral, this is one of the things that really consistently will get me out of it. And one of the things I recommend to my clients as well is like, stop thinking about yourself. Right? Pull yourself out. Remember, everything you're doing here is to solve a problem for someone else. Because if it doesn't solve a problem for someone else, it doesn't really fall into the category of your career. And it's not something you can build your next job or your next role around, which means you get to think about someone else instead of thinking about yourself. And I really do think this is one of the beautiful things about capitalism and about commerce, right? Like this is one of the reasons I actually love having a capitalistic system. And I love having a system that's rooted in exchanging money for goods and services, because I think it's genuinely so beautiful that some people have problems and other people have solutions, right? And at its best, this is like one of the wonderful things about the capitalist market is that at the end of the day, people don't pay money for things unless it solves a real problem for them, which means you get to spend all your time focused on who has a problem, how can I help them, how can I serve them, how can I solve their problem for them? And it really comes down to helping and connecting to other people, which I just find to be a massively more nourishing and sustaining kind of purpose and source of fuel in building your career than just constantly being like, do I have what I want? Have I succeeded? How do I look stacked up against my peers? So besides this kind of focus on other people being more nourishing and connecting, I also find that it is more stable and more steadying, right? Because when you're focused on yourself, you're often asking these questions like, am I good enough? Am I going to get what I want? Am I going to succeed? Am I going to make it? And those questions have unstable answers, right? Like my brain will generate different answers to those questions based on just how I'm feeling, what my emotional state is, what happened in the last like couple of hours or couple of days, right? Like there's always like an up and down sense of like, am I good enough? Am I going to succeed? Am I going to make it? Some days you'll feel like you're on top of the world. And you're like, I'm crushing it. I'm a genius. I'm definitely going to get there. And then other days you'll be like, what am I doing? I'm an idiot. I have no clue. And I'm definitely not going to make it. So like those questions have like very unstable answers and they'll swing up and down. So they don't give you that safety, that stability, and that steadiness. So where I personally recommend people find safety, stability, certainty, and steadiness is in the problem, right? So I like to think about, hey, whether or not I serve the problem, whether or not I help people solve the problem exists and people are trying to solve it. And I can bet on that every day of the week, regardless of how I feel, regardless of my emotional state, regardless of how much work I got done today, regardless of whether or not I'm going to choose to solve the problem, doesn't matter. The existence of the problem is a steady state thing in the world, right? And I can relax and that can give me a sense of safety and stability. So for me with my business, right, I think about it as like whether or not I choose to be a coach, whether or not I choose to run my business and grow my business, high achievers, Ivy League grads, consultants, people working in finance, people working in tech, right? People in prestigious jobs, they are going to hit points in their career where they feel stressed, stuck, uncertain. They know they want to do something different, but they don't know what it is. And that lack of certainty about what they're doing next keeps them stuck where they are. That problem is going to keep happening regardless of whether or not I show up, right? And create content and talk to people and do consults and coach people. Like that problem exists regardless of whether I choose to show up and help solve that problem or not, right? And that can give me that sense of steadiness and certainty of like, regardless of what I'm doing and how I feel like, whether I think I'm doing a good job or a bad job and all the different kind of self-evaluations that I could possibly do. None of that like is necessary. None of those like, am I doing a good job? Like, am I the best coach in the entire world? Like none of those questions have to be answered as like A+, yes, green for me to feel good and for me to feel safe and solid. I can find my safety and my stability in the fact that the problem exists. And people are in pain and people are searching for solutions, right? And that's going to be true regardless of whether or not I show up to serve the problem. So this is why it is so necessary for you to find the handshake between your superpowers and somebody else's high value problem, right? Reason number one, this is what is going to make somebody pay you. This is what's going to make it your career and not your hobby, is that you've angled your superpowers towards somebody else's high value problem. In the same way that you would angle a technology, you would shape a technology into a product by angling it at a use case and a customer that has a problem. Reason number two is focusing on other people's problems and how you can help them is going to give you a sense of nourishment and connection. And it's actually going to be a more sustainable sense of purpose and fuel as you go through the marathon of your career. And the third reason to focus on other people's problems and to angle your superpowers at a high value problem is it's going to give you a sense of safety and stability. Every day of the week, no matter what, regardless of how much work you do today or how good of a job you think you did, the problem exists. Problem exists, people are in pain, and people are trying to solve the problem. And you can bet on that every single day of the week, no matter what. So those are the reasons why you should strive to find the handshake between your superpowers and a high value problem. But let me also tell you about 3 blockers that people have towards finding that handshake. Blocker number 1 is people can feel like, well, hang on, are you saying that I need to be obsessed with my work, that work needs to be my whole life, that it needs to take over everything, that it needs to be my number 1 priority? Because a lot of high achievers come to me and they're like, I actually don't want work necessarily to be my number 1 priority, right? Sometimes people are just like, I just like to have other things in my life. Like work is great, but it's sort of priority 2, 3, or 4. And I prioritize having a rich life and doing things outside of work. Other people are like, I have a family, I have kids. Those things are really important. They're going to take up a meaningful share of time. And so when I talk about high value problems, right, and angling your superpowers at them, sometimes people can feel like, hey, you're also saying work needs to be your number 1 and you need to be obsessed. And what happens there is people are conflating high value problem with intensity of work and hours worked to solve that problem. And those are actually just 2 completely separate things. So you can angle your superpowers very intelligently and very strategically towards a high value problem. That doesn't mean you have to work 100 hours a week or 60 hours a week. It still means that you can balance your career with the other things that you love and that you prioritize in your life. This is really just about in the time that you're working, whether you work 2 hours a day or 12 hours a day, it's about making sure that that is angled towards a problem that really matters to someone else. And it's a high value problem, right? Same as with the technology example, just because you have chosen to angle your product, right, at lawyers who have gotten 1,000 discovery documents doesn't mean that you have to have 700 features in your product, right? That's the analogy I'd make. You could almost argue you don't need 700 features. It's better to do a few things really, really well for that stressed out customer that's trying to solve their problem. But just because it's a high value problem to that person, it doesn't mean you need to offer 700 features worth of breadth. It just means it's a high value problem. And you can actually make a very simple, streamlined, easy to maintain product, right? That doesn't take you a lot of effort, that doesn't have 700 features and require 10 teams of engineers to maintain it and solve that problem really, really well. So that's blocker number 1 that people have to finding the handshake, is they're like, would they conflate the high value problem with the intensity of working on the problem? And they're like, wait, this means I have to become obsessed with my work? Not at all. It just means that any time that you do spend working is angled in a really intelligent and strategic way, and that you are angling your career towards a high value problem so you can be paid really well for it. Blocker number 2 that I hear from people the last few years, right, as we work on finding the handshake between your superpowers and a high value problem, is AI is going to take all the jobs. Jobs aren't going to exist anymore. And so sure, today, the work I'm doing right now solves a high value problem for someone else. But honestly, the models are going to take over. It's all going to be done by Claude or by ChatGPT. And so there's not going to be a place for me to do the work that I want to do in 1 to 2 years, right? So I want to push back a little bit against this thinking. And I want to give you the analogy of Microsoft Excel. So when I was at Harvard Business School, I was in section D. And so when you go to HBS, your whole first year, you're in the same classroom the entire year. And you're with the same 90 people, that's your section. And you take all your classes together. And the classroom that my section was in had a little plaque on the wall, and it was the inventor of Excel had actually done his section, had also done their whole first year, their RC year, in our section's classroom, which I loved. And so if you think of Microsoft Excel, right, pre-Excel, what were the kind of analytics people could do? People literally were working with graph paper and pen and pencil, right? And they were manually doing analytics. And once Excel arrived, you could say, oh my gosh, we're not going to need analysts anymore, because before we needed 10 analysts to do this very simple analysis. And now a single analyst can do 100 times more complex analysis. So now there's not going to be any more analyst jobs, right? Anywhere in the world. Is that actually what happened post Excel? No, the demand for analyst jobs skyrocketed post Excel, right? Like even though the capabilities that were unleashed, the analytical capabilities that were unleashed through Excel were so much more sophisticated than what you could do with pen and paper, the reality is it just created more demand for analysts, right? And I think this is a microcosm of what's true in all of human history and all of human behavior, which is you can always bet on the bottomless human desire for more. Even when you give humans more capabilities, more features, faster, more sophisticated, etc., some way, somehow, humans want more. I don't think we've ever found the ceiling on how much people want. And I think there's a few reasons for this, right? Reason number one is hedonic adaptation, right? Which is when you the first time you see an Excel analysis, you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is so sophisticated. This is incredible, right? But very quickly, that becomes your new normal. That's what hedonic adaptation is all about, or the hedonic treadmill is all about, is you can have a massive step change upwards in the quality of your life or the quality of the analysis or the quality of the products that you're using, right? And it's amazing at first, and then you normalize to it. And it becomes your new normal, and you start being like, okay, what else? That's fine. That's boring, but I want more, right? So hedonic adaptation is one of the things that keeps people always hungry for more, right? It keeps demand active in the market. The second reason that I think like humans have a bottomless desire for more is competition, right? If you think about all the management consulting companies, right, which like AI is very much like is something that can do a lot of the work that analysts can do. You can also think about all of those consulting companies are competing for big corporate clients, right? Which means that like the more that one company uses AI to deliver like more sophisticated products and tools and consulting outputs for one company, the other ones are going to catch up. They're going to be like, oh, Bain offered this like dashboard that they created in a single day. Well, BCG is going to offer 3 dashboards that's created in half a day. And McKinsey is going to offer like, it's not even a dashboard. It's like a responsive system where you just like ask it natural language queries and it just gives you the exact data that you need. It's not even a static dashboard. It's something flexible, right? And so there's going to be endless competition between all the players in the market to use AI to get better and better and better, which means it's also going to be more bottomless human desire for more. And I think the third reason that people always want more, right, even in a business context, is that people have endless imagination and curiosity and the next set of questions that they want answered, right? So if you think of the pre-Excel days, it's almost like we were all standing like, 2 steps lower, like on a staircase. We were standing lower and like we could only see to a certain vantage point and we could only think of certain questions to ask ourselves. And once Excel came online and you could do so much more sophisticated analytics, it's not like humans were satisfied and they were like, great, all my analytical questions are answered. I have no more like analytical questions that I can think of. Instead, it's like we took 2 steps up on the staircase and now we can see broader vistas, right? It's like there was a wall and now we've like stepped up 2 steps and we can see higher up above the wall, which means we have more ideas. We have more curiosity. We have more imagination. It's like, oh, well, if you can do that analysis, actually, that raises 3 more questions for me. Can you cut the data like 3 more ways? And wait, what about this? And what about this? And what about this? Right? So when you give people more, they just have more questions and they want more next steps. They have more curiosity, more imagination. They can imagine, oh my gosh, well, now if we can do this, can we also do this? Wait, I have a follow-up question over here. So even though I know it can feel like AI is going to take all the jobs, and this can be a blocker for people then imagining how can my superpowers handshake really well with somebody else's high value problem, I want to encourage you to think about the Excel example and be like, how could it be true that AI will create more demand for humans and more demand for my kind of job? Because like I said, I think the one thing we can always bet on the problem exists and people want to solve it. And we can bet on humans want more, right? Humans are never satisfied, no matter how much you give them. They're like, well, I want more. I have further questions. This has become boring to me. And now I want the next shiny thing. I have follow-ups. I can imagine more. Now that you've given me this, I have 17 more things that I want. Humans are always going to want more. And so in that context, I want you to think about, okay, what is the high value problem that I can solve? Probably using AI as my companion and my co-pilot and and as something that enhances my superpowers. Fine, right? But let me assume that there's only going to be more demand for what I do, more problems, and like more demand for those problems to be solved. And if I'm in that frame of mind, then how would I think about what the handshake is between my superpowers and somebody else's high value problem? The third blocker that people have in terms of finding this handshake is they're just like, I just don't have ideas. Like I'm struggling to do the brainstorming. I'm struggling to do the strategic thinking. I just don't know. Like I'm asking my brain, what's the handshake? And my brain is like, I don't know. Right. And if this is you, I want you to come talk to me. This is exactly what I help people do. It is so helpful to have an external thought partner, someone who's an expert who spends all day doing this, and someone who has frameworks and tools and structures to help you do this. You are a really good strategic thinker, right? It's not that you can't do this on your own, but the other common phenomenon that I see is because it's your career, your life, it's your baby, it's going to feel really personal to you. And chances are your brain is going to bring up a bunch of emotion, right? You're going to feel afraid or overwhelmed or feel like, oh my gosh, like I can't fail, right? Or I'm just so confused about this. Like chances are your emotions are going to be higher because it's your career. It's going to make it a little bit harder for you to do the strategic thinking that you can usually do in all the other areas of your life. So give yourself the gift of a thought partner, right? Come talk to me. I have no emotional skin in the game. My strategic brain can very easily stay fully online, right? While I'm talking to you, while I'm talking to all my clients, I can help bring your brain fully back online as well. I've got so much pattern recognition. I help people do this all day long. I have a good sense of the common patterns and the common pathways that people can take based on what their superpowers are, what their experience is, what their interests are, what their desires are. I have a good sense of like some of the places people typically end up. So you can lean on my pattern recognition. And I also have such a great sense of like structures, frameworks, tools, questions to ask you, exercises that we can do to really kind of excavate this and do this strategic discovery together. And so I have a whole process for how I help people to do this. And so if your blocker is, I just feel like I don't have ideas. I feel like I am querying my brain. Like, what would the answer be? And my brain's just outputting, I don't know. Come talk to me, book your free career audit, and we'll walk through all the things that I've been talking about. And we'll really figure out how do we build a plan for us to do this together, and how can thought partnership, structure, frameworks, tools, expertise, pattern recognition, how can all of those things really accelerate you and unlock this for you so you can build a career strategy that not only feels really good on the inside, but also generates a lot of external success on the outside. Because when these two things are in a handshake, right? Because when you are like, on the one hand, I am expressing my superpowers, I'm doing the work I really want to do, I am like building towards the career that I actually want, and I've owned my wants, and I've found my home in the process. I'm not waiting for some external threshold to finally make me feel good about myself. I've actually sunk into and fallen in love with the process. When all of those internal components are really in line, and this external component is in line, right? And you're like, I've angled my superpowers, my desires, my kind of process that I've fallen in love with. I've angled all of that at a high value problem, which means I can see the impact of what I'm doing every day. It's paying me really well. It's supporting my lifestyle. And I can I'm getting to tap into the nourishment and connection of really doing work that serves other people. And I have that safety and stability of like, this problem exists. Like I'm going to be okay no matter what. Right. And I'm getting to deliver the solution to that problem. And delivering that solution is an expression of like the best things in me and the work that I most love doing. When those two things are in a handshake, that's how you build a career that feels as good on the inside as it looks on the outside. A career that you are proud to post about on LinkedIn, proud to tell your classmates about at reunion. You're free of compare and despair because you're like, I know what I'm doing and I know it's great. Right. So you're so proud of how it looks. And at the same time, it feels good every day as you're doing it. You're not having Sunday scaries. You're not dragging yourself out of bed in the morning. You're not dreading the start of the workday. Instead, you're like, this enlivens me. This energizes me. This connects me to myself. This connects me to my purpose. This connects me to others. This connects me to the overall life that I want to be living. Whether you work 4 hours a day, 2 hours a day, 12 hours a day, whether however much you end up working and whatever role work plays in your life, right? Whether that's big or small, having this handshake in the part of your day when you are working is what helps this part of your life give you energy and give you fuel instead of depleting you. And that's the vision. That's what I'm ultimately working towards for all of my clients. So book your free career audit with me. We're going to step back. We're going to take a big picture look at your career. We're really going to understand what is it that you want, and then what are all the gaps between what you want and where you are. And we're going to chart a path out, right? We are going to make the plan for how do we close those gaps and how do I help you build the career that you actually want? What is the mix of tools, frameworks, strategies, thought partnership that can really help you close all those gaps? You'll get a sense of whether working with me or working with a coach could be helpful for you in building the career you actually want and in executing the plan that we developed together. And more than anything, whether you end up working with me or not, you're going to walk away from that free career audit, first off, with just a sense of like relief right? You would have taken the time to take a big step backward and just like look at the bigger picture of things and have an understanding of like what is not working, why is it not working, and what is the path out of here, right? Just having that diagnosis and that action plan, even if you don't work with me, is going to give you so much relief and clarity. It's going to help you realize you're not alone, you're not crazy, this is normal, and there is a way to get to the place where you want to be. So just give yourself the gift of that, even if we don't end up working together. And of course, we can also work together. I totally recommend it because it's a great way to actually just accelerate the execution of that plan and turn this transition, this period, into something that takes a few months or a few weeks instead of something that takes years or something that, where you just feel stuck, confused, going in circles, and you don't really get to the answer that you want. So book your free career audit. The link is in the episode description, and I can't wait to talk to you. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Aligned Ambition podcast. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already and share this podcast with anyone you know that you think could use it. If you'd like to explore working together in a one-on-one coaching engagement with me, book a free consult call at poojavcoaching.com/contact. You can grab that link in the episode description. And if you have any questions, thoughts, or topics you want me to cover in this podcast, shoot me an email at pooja@poojavcoaching.com. You can grab that in the episode description too. Talk to you soon.